Jay, how are you?
Very good. Great to see you, Fernando. Thanks so much for this opportunity.
No, it's a great pleasure to have you here with us. Thanks for accepting our invitation. So let's start with the questions. Um, my first question is related to the research question. How do you get the research question for your next trial?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they can come through a number of different pathways. When I think about our research program and some of the really big questions that we've tried to tackle, a lot of them have come from direct patient experience. So as an example, there was a case that I managed with a patient who had had a hip fracture, was found to have a myocardial infarction and heart failure. And as the cardiologist, I was called to manage this patient. And the way that we managed the patient made me question whether or not medical optimization of hip fractures might be the best approach. And from there, we undertook a large randomized controlled trial of accelerated surgery for hip fractures versus standard timing. So a lot of times it's direct patients that you see where something tells you that the way that we're thinking about problem X, maybe in fact, that's not the right way to think about it. And a lot of times questions come from when you do a trial, invariably the results of the trial identify some new questions that end up being very important to address. A key thing though is focus on big issues. A key thing is keep in mind that it's got to be practical so you can do it in our interest, and what I would advocate should be the interest of most, is do things at a big scale in a global context. Because even though we're interested in improving health in Hamilton, our real goal is we want to change health in a global context. So think about practical big questions, drive the questions from clinical care and from the research that you undertake.
Great. Do you discuss your question with a mentor, with your team, with any advisor? How do you do to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, I mean, invariably, every question we start off with, there's something you see. It goes through a process of refinement, definitely over weeks to months as we keep working through, what is practical, what is feasible about actually undertaking this question. So for certain, I've had the good fortune of having great mentorship. Gordon Guy, Salim Youssef were my PhD supervisors, and they still are, great mentors to me. And so, they're involved in a lot of the research we do. And you want as many people on the team that are going to play a key role to be involved in those discussions, because to pull off any trial, you need a big team, and you want everyone to feel like it's their trial, because everyone's belief it's their trial makes them more engaged in actually getting the trial done.
Oh, great. And after everybody knows that you have to get the money, you get the grants. I know that it is a really tough work for you. But after that, how do you do to recruit 10,000 people, like in POISE2, for example, or 40,000 people like in Vision Study? How do you do that?
Well, the first thing I think we all have to recognize is that to raise a child, people say you need a village. And I would say to answer a good clinical question, you need a planet. And so the big thing is you need to realize is you need to create, a community of like-minded individuals who are interested in your topic around the world. And then it's engaging them in a way that makes them feel invested, that it's also their trial. So you need to definitely get and build a collaboration. And key things about building a collaboration is that you have to be genuinely invested in the academic success of everyone in that collaboration, because people are busy, they have many opportunities. And secondly is that you have to be driven by, we're going to do really good science that'll answer important questions. And last, I think, is that it's really crucial is that you need to do the trial in your own center, and you need to be a top recruiter. And that's important for two things. One is it's to show people that you walk the walk and don't simply talk the talk. But also, two, you want to encounter the inevitable challenges that are going to come up in a trial and have figured out solutions before someone else encounters those problems. and you actually yourself have experience. And there's always nuances with protocols that, there's one thing we say, but then once you start doing something, you realize, you need to give consideration for certain things as you're practically doing this and rolling it out. So those are key things, I think, to how do you make trials happen for recruitment.
And tell the people, tell to the audience your daily work, because I've seen you calling them to your international network every day. So you have a tough work to be all these people recruiting. How is that? Yeah,
so I'm not sure if the right word is tough, but there's lots of work. But it's like any relationship or any connection. The more you interact with people, the more present that trial is in the front of everyone's mind, and making the success of it happen. Obviously, in doing international trials, you deal with a lot of time zones, so it's pretty common that your days start early and they end late just because of the need for interactions with overseas colleagues. But like any relationship, if you really want it to be successful, you need to stay in contact with people and make sure that it's a strong relationship to make it successful. But I would add, though, Fernando, that the one thing about it that's also very nice is that you get to make relationships with people around the world. So the reality is, what's the chance that you, an Argentinian, and myself, a Canadian, get a chance to meet, have a strong friendship, spend years of time together, and our families know each other. And so a real upside too, beyond simply the fun of the science and the challenge of getting the work done needed, is that you also have the benefit that you develop friendships and you get to learn about other people's cultures. And this is one thing I say to young people who are considering research. Clinical care is fantastic and it's very rewarding, and research is only about making clinical care better. Research within a life of a clinician also, though, can be very positive, because you just will get to see a lot of the world, you get to make friends in different places, and that's really enjoyable.
Oh, great. That's fantastic. I agree with you. Okay, and once the study is finished, how do you feel? If the result is positive, are you happy? If the result is negative, or do not reject the null hypothesis, are you frustrated? How do you feel when you have the results of the trial?
Yeah, well, I've had experiences on both sides. I think invariably people are most excited when they have significant results. It's a natural tendency. At the same time, the trials that we do that don't have a significant result, or there's a benefit but there's a harm. So like the first big trial we did in perioperative medicine with beta blockers have benefit. They prevent perioperative MI, but death and stroke went up. I think that what's important as a researcher is to recognize there's no single trial you're going to do that's going to resolve all the problems in that area. Each trial is adding cumulative knowledge that you can then build upon to keep helping to figure out how we're going to improve care more broadly. So even when it's not the result you expected, invariably you gain important insights that can still allow us to continue the journey of how do we really transform care. But it's very unusual for a single study to transform care itself. It's a collection of a program of research that allows you to get in that step. So yes, of course, you feel more excited when all the results are significant and you can tell your mother you cured cancer, but that's pretty unusual. And it's always to keep in context. It's the insights you gain that allow us to keep figuring out how do we improve the system and make healthcare better.
And about all your trials that you performed, which is your best, your preferred trial?
I think that'd be like saying, who's your best child? I think the one thing that is true, as you do more and more trials, you get the benefit that you gain more experience, and inevitably, I think as time goes on, you've learned a lot of things, so you can make even more informed choices. But I don't think that any of them it would be very hard pressed to say this was the best one, but they've all, I think, contributed, and they've all helped to make our group better researchers and have advanced knowledge. But like my kids, I love them all.
But I think POISE 1 with the beta blockers in the perioperative period, maybe because it's from your heart, because maybe it was the first large trial that you performed.
Well, it's like your first child. It's not
yes.
It's your favorite child, but there's no doubt that first experience is a very memorable experience that, you know, and obviously we learned a lot from POISE 1, not only about just perioperative effects of the sympathetic system and how beta blockers can have benefit, but also risk. But then we learned about the importance of hypotension in the surgical setting. And then also, importantly, it allowed us to establish a network that could then keep figuring out how to tackle this problem. And so, you know, in many ways, obviously it was without POISE 1, none of what else happened would have happened. But you know, obviously, MANAGE to me was an enormously important trial because it started us down a path to demonstrate that, you know, myocardial injury after non-cardiac surgery, which was the focus of your master's thesis, and you published the first paper, you know, that defined that concept, that's modifiable. And, you know, that's a big deal. And obviously, we're working now on getting MANAGE 2 up and going and getting further funding for addressing that whole issue.
So talking about MINS, just for the audience, is myocardial injury after non-cardiac surgery. Please explain to the audience, just simple, what is MINS? And my second question is, how do you feel the MINS concept impact actually nowadays the international practice?
Yeah, so at a broad level, what MINS is capturing all of the prognostically important ischemic myocardial injury that's happening around the time of surgery. And surgery is a very unique setting because most patients are getting narcotics when ischemic myocardial injury happens, and that very commonly can mask typical symptoms that we rely on in everyday care to alert us that someone's having an ischemic event. And so that led to the VISION study, which measured troponins in everyone postoperatively to identify these ischemic myocardial injuries. So MINS includes people who will fulfill the universal definition of MI, but also prognostically important ischemic myocardial injuries that do not fulfill the universal definition of MI, because we know that they have a big impact on long-term outcome. You know, there's no doubt if you look at the number of publications of MINS, and you look at the amount of research happening, you also look at a number of international guidelines that are now recommending to measure troponins perioperatively. It's a bit like every aspect of medicine. It takes serious time to change care at a global level, but there's no doubt that path is well underway. A systematic review just published last year included 169 papers on MINS and showed how when people have MINS, their outcomes are profoundly worse, risk-adjusted compared to if they don't have MINS at 30 days, at 1 year, and beyond. And, you know, so I think a bit like there was a period of time that's hard for people to remember, but there was a period of time where most cardiologists did not believe atrial fibrillation caused strokes. It's difficult to believe in our current world, but then it took a fair bit of time and trials, but even as the first trials were positive, most people were still not anticoagulating patients. And then once there was a series of trials that showed, hey, anticoagulation works, then almost, you know, in a very short period of time, it became the standard and everyone accepted that. So I think MINS is on the same path. It's just that it takes time, but I certainly think, you know, work yourself, but also many people around the world have done, has really gotten us substantially down this path. And I think it's the clock was not going to turn back. It's going to continue to advance, and we'll get more and more effective therapies. And once that happens, it'll just become standard of care.
Oh, perfect, PJ. So here in the audience, we have many physicians who work with every day with patients doing surgical risk evaluations. So for example, tomorrow you have to see a patient, a male of 70 years old, let's say with 2 risk factors, high cholesterol, hypertension, no severe cardiovascular disease. What do you indicate to this patient in the pre and the post-operative period just to evaluate risk? What do you say to the patient to do? I mean, stress test, echocardiogram, troponin, BNP, what do you use?
Yeah, so our standard of care here in Hamilton, based on large studies, is to measure NT-proBNP in patients aged 65 or greater, or people under 65, excuse me, under 65 who are undergoing non-cardiac surgery. The reason we do that is that we've done a number of big studies looking at non-invasive testing. In non-invasive testing, it does improve risk prediction amongst patients who will have events, but it exaggerates risks in a much larger group that are not going to have events. And it's a lot more expensive, and it's inconvenient in that you have to go to the hospital, come back, go to the hospital, come back, versus we can do point of care NT-proBNP testing at about a 20th of the cost of the non-invasive tests. We can do it in the pre-op clinic, see the patient right then, and everything is done at one time. Moreover, from the vision study that Emmanuelle Decept led us in, where she measured NT-proBNP in 10,000 people before non-cardiac surgery, NT-proBNP dramatically predicts who's going to get a cardiac event, but also who's going to die. And importantly, it improves risk prediction not just in people that are going to have a bad event, it improves risk prediction amongst people that are not going to have an event. And so we use NT-proBNP to decide who needs consults and who needs to be followed post-op. And so by measuring it pre-op, you can avoid some consults in patients who are low risk and going to do well, but appropriately identify higher risk patients who then we help to co-manage throughout the hospitalization period. And we use the NT-proBNP to estimate the risk of patients.
And you have to indicate post-operative measurement of troponin, or the physicians, they do that just systematically?
Yeah, so in our center, our surgeons, they have pre-printed orders, and based upon whether or not the patient's over age 65 or the patient is under 65 with known vascular disease or has a positive NT-proBNP, they will automatically get troponins post-operatively. If we hadn't been involved with that patient's care, if it's elevated, it's an automatic consult to our perioperative care service. So basically, it's like most things. If you want to make it happen, you got to make it simple and just practical in terms of getting into place. The way that we found to do that is put it into standardized orders, so it's an automatic checkbox and it's simple to happen.
Great, PJ. Great. Let's play a final game.
Okay.
This game is a yes/no answer game. Okay.
Maybe.
So maybe not maybe yes/no. Let's say the same patient that I told you before. Do you indicate beta blockers before a general surgery?
Sorry, this is a patient that's not on a beta blocker?
Yes.
No.
He's not on beta blockers, and you indicate no.
No.
And you stop beta blockers if the patient is receiving beta blockers?
I put that patient in POISE 3, which is answering that exact question. That's what I do with that patient.
So he will receive a rosuvastatin or placebo, or?
Yeah, so POISE 3 is addressing blood pressure medication management strategy. So if you're on a beta blocker, if you're on a calcium channel blocker, it's exploring what is the right way to manage it. In general, if the patient wasn't in the trial, I would continue the beta blocker, but I would offer parameters. It would have to be that the systolic blood pressure prior to surgery is at least 120 or greater, and the heart rate is greater than 60. But ideally, I put that patient in POISE 3.
Okay, the last. Do you stop aspirin before general surgery if the patient is receiving aspirin?
Yes, I stop aspirin with one important caveat. If the patient has had a stent at any time in their history, or PCI, that is the subgroup in POISE 2 where there was a big benefit of continuing aspirin. So if they've had prior PCI, I do not stop aspirin. But if they have not had prior PCI, I stop aspirin.
Oh, great. So, perfect. I did all my work. I felt like a reporter. So for my first time talking with you, we discussed a lot of medicine before and research, but never this kind of interview. So PJ, thank you for your collaboration, for accepting our invitation. It was a great honor for me to be here talking with you. So see you.
It was a great honor for me to be part of it. And thank you for our friendship over the years and collaboration. And I always enjoy my time in Argentina and wish you the best.
Okay, thanks, PJ. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.